Welcome to the weekly podcast. In this bonus episode, we'll chat with the man, the myth, and the brains behind the program, Howard Mortman. During the next 20, 25, 30 minutes or so, we'll listen to some of his favorite clips and answer some listener questions. I'm Shannon Rice, the podcast producer here at C-SPAN, and I'm joined by my colleague, Rachel Katz. Let's jump right in. Thanks for joining us today, Howard.
Thank you both. I know you said man, myth, and brains. I think I'm more in the myth category there, but I'll work with it.
All right, Howard, let's start with why you wanted to start this podcast. Was there a specific event or finding in the video library that made you say, aha, I have to share this? What started it all?
Well, after I got assigned the responsibility of doing it, then I said, what do I want to do with this? Two things going on. One, I'm a huge fan of what we have in C-SPAN in the video library and the archives. And we always say about how many hours there are, 280,000 hours, 270,000 hours. It's so fun to demonstrate that. It's so fun to actually give people examples of the gems, as we say, that they can find in the video library. So there's that part of it, just being a political junkie. And then the other part is this is a really neat format. It's a really neat way to pull something off and get and reach new people who are connected to us in some way, or want to be, or should be. Maybe not have the emotional bond, but to C-SPAN, but have lived through some of these historical moments, some of these topics we talk about, and kind of hit that bit of scratch that nostalgic itch, as it were, for political history. So we've been doing this, Shannon. We've been doing it for 2 years now, I think. And I have to say, because I don't know if I'll get the chance, Shannon Rice, the executive producer, and does all 15 C-SPAN podcasts single-handedly, is an amazing talent. And joined here by the wonderful Rachel Katz, who's been a big supporter and of all the business ventures of C-SPAN and affiliate relations, and is also a big listener and booster of the C-SPAN podcast, The Weekly.
I do love The Weekly, and I need to dig in a little to the brain of Howard Mortman, because I don't understand how you know what is in the video library. I've worked here for a very long time, and I am a watcher of our product, a listener of our product. I don't remember what we had on yesterday. I don't remember what I did this morning. How can you possibly archive 280,000 hours worth of product to come up with a podcast?
Well, here's the big thing. I'm a true political junkie. And so I love this. This is it's a job, yes, but it's a passion. I just love the C-SPAN mission of not having an opinion on who wins or loses, but just loving the game, the politics, the policy. And I've lived this history. I'm in my, that's right, early 20s.
Me too.
You too. But so much of what C-SPAN started in 79. That's roughly when I first became politically aware. So a lot of my memories over the years have coincided with what we have recorded on television. So this is not dry book stuff for me. This is coming alive moments that I personally remember and live through. And I guess I don't know if this is a demo thing, but I find that the people who listen are the people who share those kind of, the generational love of politics and what the government is up to. So, it's a credit to the video library, and I will say how easy it is to search and find stuff, but part of it's you have to know what you're looking for, and you have to remember the big moments. So, if I can relive political history through my personal history, that's the real fun part. That's where the gems come in.
So we solicited calls for this adventure, and we are going to hear from one of your listeners right now.
This is Steve Rosenberg after 5 p.m. on, November 1st, 2023. I am calling about the invitation to comment on the podcast on C-SPAN radio. And I just wanted to mention C-SPAN radio is absolutely my favorite radio station. I don't have a television. And living in the Washington, D.C. area, I'm in Rockville, Maryland, gives me the fringe benefit of getting C-SPAN radio on 90.1 and not having to use whatever that satellite radio system to listen to it. So I thank you for C-SPAN radio. I appreciate the entertaining podcasts. And I do wonder, a couple of questions. how it's decided what's covered, and how often they change. It sounds like once a week. I won't give my phone number. Bye.
Howard, do you want to take that? How do we decide what to cover, and how often does it change?
Sure, and I wrote down notes from his call, and Steve Rosenberg, thank you for calling. I understand you called at 5 o'clock, so that's I appreciate that. How do we decide what to cover? Thanks to Shannon and C-SPAN Radio, they've kind of given me a bit of leeway and really come up with the ideas. The bottom line of what we do is we try to match up something happening right now in current events and showing historical precedent to it, or somehow connecting moments in the past that reflect or inform or kind of fill in blanks. So much in politics has happened before. I think the worst thing you could tell journalism students is, or the best thing you could tell journalism students is, never use the word unprecedented, because many things have happened before, not to the degree and the extent of some things, but so much of what we experience now in politics is mirrored somewhere in the last couple of decades. So how do we pick the topics? A lot of it's driven by what's going on now, and what are there things that we can connect to the past. Also, just to look ahead, we're taping this in December, and I already know what I want to do in January for the Iowa caucuses and the New Hampshire primary, and I already know what angles and clips I want to pull for that. So it's 15 minutes roughly each episode of clips from the past connected somehow to the present. Steve Rosenberg also mentioned, I appreciate the entertaining part of that, saying that the podcasts are entertaining. That's tough to pull off, not for comedy reasons, but we are not an entertaining network by definition. We are a serious gravitas network that shows politics covered, gavel to gavel. So we don't set out to be funny, because that shows personality and that shows opinion. It's a way of exhibiting that. But if we have clips and examples of politicians saying or doing things that people might enjoy hearing, I think that's totally fair game without making fun of them, just to show that side. I will say one thing, to make it entertaining, of course, I type everything up on funny typing paper, so that helps out. I use a funny font, so that kind of gets me going.
Well, this question, I guess, is for both of you, because Shannon is your producer. How many times have you had to change your podcast idea because of something that happened in the news, breaking news, or something timely? Do you ever have to do that? And how difficult or how easy is it to sort of switch things around?
In the last couple of months, it's been pretty, Howard gives us these ideas and he has scripts written, and we've had to change up the order in which they've been going out, especially around everything with the speaker's race and the war in Israel. We've had to change up a few things. You don't want to be distasteful, especially if you're putting out something that's a little bit more lighthearted when something terrible has happened in the world. I don't know, Howard, do you want to?
Yeah, I think that's right. Two parts of that. One, we do, we switch it up if something big, like a big death of a president happens. We'll probably pull what we had planned, but that's very rare. To Shannon's point about this is not a TikTok of what's happening every day in Congress or what's in the news, because that would be two things. It would be really tough to pull off because of just the runway of time needed to pull these together. And Shannon puts hours into this. But it's also not intended to do that. It's not intended to say, here's what happened in Congress today. Enough other people do that. And there's a huge market for that in other places. But there's no real place for people to go to kind of connect. We did when George Santos was expelled, we did a podcast of looking back not at him, but at Jim Traficant, the congressman from Ohio who was expelled. And we played a lot of his farewell speech, his final speech to Congress in July 2002. So that was we kind of knew something was going to happen with Santos. We planned for that. We kind of had that. I guess if we can tell a secret here, Shannon, we kind of had that one in the can a little bit, just waiting to, for the right week to pull that off.
Yeah, we were quite ready for something to happen on that one, which was all Howard. He can see into the future in a way that I don't understand. And it just every week I'm like, wow, how did we hit the nail so hard on the head right there?
That tricky little brain of his.
Well, this is why I've made so much money playing the lottery. And I don't need to be working here. I can retire early because of seeing into the future. So.
Well, you sent me a list of some of your favorite clips. We're going to listen to one of those right now. This is former Senator Robert Byrd from, you didn't actually tell me the year, but that's okay.
I can guess it.
You can guess it.
Stump
It's
Howard.
him speaking about his old age. Let's listen.
Mr. President, I feel compelled to address head on the news stories in recent weeks that have pointed out the shocking discovery, yes, shocking discovery that I am growing older. Did you get that? It's a shocking discovery that I am growing older.
Now, remind our listeners, what was this podcast? It was focusing on, it was a little different than we usually do. You used his entire floor speech.
Yeah, I did. And nothing makes a podcast pop than hearing Robert Byrd, former Democratic Senator from West Virginia. This was actually an outlier for us. It was the entire floor speech he made about 12 minutes. I think it was, since Shannon, you pressed me, I should know this. I think it was like in the, he died. When did he die? Rachel, he died like in 2009. So this was like 2006, I think. And he was getting up in his age, and so he made a whole speech about it's okay to be young, it's okay to be old. And the reason we did this one, it was because of all the news stories surrounding Joe Biden that continue right now about him being old and Donald Trump, 79 and 80, 77, 81, and how old age plays into a politician. Well, I just remembered this speech, and you're right. We just let the whole thing run, and boy, that was a lot of fun.
He died in 2010.
See,
just a fact check.
Rachel knows these things. That's amazing.
Google knows these things.
Rachel, put your
Thank
phone
God
down.
for Google. I was trying to get there, but you beat me. So there, we have another. Well, I'm going to ask you this. As our director of communications, which I think is your title, correct?
That's it used to be Great Expectations.
Yes.
Yes.
How do we, as a podcast, we'll play this clip. It's from Conan O'Brien back in, when is this from? 1995 at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. We'll play this, and then I'll ask you my question. Yeah.
Finally, I have an announcement for those of you watching tonight's event live on C-SPAN. For God's sake, it's Saturday night. Outside. Meet a woman. Come on. There are things you can do.
So as our director of communications, how do we as a network, and this is more a serious question, play up or play to the kind of comedy that's around the serious nature of what we cover and how we cover it? The lone chair or the lone podium that stays for 20 minutes. How do you deal with that?
That's Shannon, I will say this. That's a wonderful question because so much of our reputation is built into those kind of moments of people joking about watching us. And it's funny, some of the people who make fun of us the most are actually reporters and media people who don't understand what we do in our special niche because we don't look like anything else on TV. We're odd, we're strange, we're unique, we're different, whatever. And people don't know how to process that. So let's just make fun of them. When Conan O'Brien, that was his first of two times he was the celebrity comedian at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and he made fun of us. I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was. We did a podcast. Shannon and I did a podcast around the time of the White House Correspondents' Dinner this year in April of the best C-SPAN jokes that were told. And I've always thought I was always entertained by this one. It's kind of an obvious one, but he does it gentle. So, one day Rachel and Shannon, they'll stop making fun of us because they'll stop mentioning us, and we don't want that to happen. So, I'm happy if they jab at us. We can take it, it's or if they make fun of congressmen or people they see on C-SPAN, but our logo is up there when they do that. I'm totally fine with that. I think that's a good thing, not a bad thing.
How does that work? That's a question I have personally. I mean, when NBC does a SNL skit and they use our likeness, do we get paid for that?
I will go over our business expert, Rachel, but I don't.
I'm not a business expert, but I think that's part of fair use.
I think it's part of fair use. I think if they there's like a licensing part of it. If they want to use our video in a movie or a documentary or a TV show, they have to license that. But I think just flat out Saturday Night Live, putting our logo on, I think is totally fine. And I'm not the guy to tell that we don't want you to put C-SPAN on in front of millions of people on Saturday night. So no, feel free to keep on doing that. Yeah.
I was just curious. Well, it's that time where we have another caller we're going to listen to. Now, we're not done yet.
No,
you're not out of the hot seat quite yet. Sorry about that. We have another caller. Let's take a listen.
Hi, this is a caller from Charlottesville, Virginia. What does your family think about your knowledge of the C-SPAN archives?
I wish the caller had identified herself, but sounds like a very brilliant, bright third year. I'm sorry, not a junior. Third year at UVA. I'm sorry. I was taken aback. What was the question again? What's for dinner? What
makes you say that,
laundry?
Howard?
I don't know. Why is the TV not on working? The question was.
What does your family think about you doing this podcast and your knowledge of C-SPAN?
I didn't know they knew about it. Oh dear. Oh gosh.
The secret is out.
I'm gonna have a lot to answer to tonight. I'll tell you that. They find the whole thing quirky. They know my love of politics. They know my love of not having an opinion. This actually, working for C-SPAN, it matches my not having an opinion on anything as a tactical part of life, not strategic but tactical. It means it just gets me on a conversation, and my love of politics. So they think it's quirky. None of them are interested at all in what I do in the family business, as it were. My kids' knowledge of politics is not from me. It's from, and boy, they're not going to like this. It's from Instagram and TikTok. It's just like the very. I have a 20-year-old and how old is she now? Probably like 15 or so. The second one, who knows? And I won't mention their names, but they know they're very bright young ladies, but don't have the extent of going into politics or media like I do. So
we had a listener email from Tevi Troy. I'm saying that correctly, right?
I've never heard of him.
I know. He said, "Hi, don't judge me, but I'm a listener of C-SPAN's The Weekly. I have a question for the questions episode. Who had the crazy idea of letting Howard Mortman run wild in the C-SPAN archives?"
Well, they let the guardrails down one day, and they said Mortman can go in. I have to say, since we mentioned the name Tevi Troy, that Tevi has been part of the C-SPAN family, extended family. Rachel is here, who runs the Presidential Historian Survey every 4 years, and Tevi's on the panel for that. He's written books, and we've covered them on Book TV. He's appeared on Washington Journal, and he now works for the Bipartisan Policy Center, and has written books about the presidency and intellectuals. So for me, Tevi is kind of like the sweet spot. I want to dazzle someone like Tevi every week with something that, since he's brilliant and knows everything, is there anything new I can show or demonstrate to him through a raw source, through audio? So there are people in mind when I'm doing these podcasts. I do have people in mind when I'm doing the podcast of I want to impress that person, not show off, but can that person learn from this? Can that person be exposed to something new in C-SPAN video? And Tevi's an example of that.
If there's a way I would explain Howard Mortman, it would be razzle dazzle. So yes, saying that you want to dazzle someone feels very Howard Mortman-esque.
Since it's audio, I can't show you my jazz hands, but boy, they are going right now.
One of the topics we have picked on a lot here at The Weekly is baseball. We're going to listen to a clip from a 1991 interview with not then President George W. Bush.
Baseball is America. I mean, if you want to be associated with what's truly American, and you're a politician, you better get close to baseball.
Howard, why do we pick baseball clips so often?
Yeah, a tough question, but a fair question, Shannon. So that clip, I've used that in two different ways. That clip, 1991, as you mentioned, is when Brian Lamb went down to Texas and interviewed the then partial owner of the Texas Rangers, George W. Bush, a year before his father ran for re-election as president. And the interview was centered, in a classic Brian Lamb fashion, the interview was centered really about him being the partial owner of the Texas Rangers, and very little politics in it. But politics did arise, and Brian asks George W. Bush about politics and about politicians' love of baseball, and that's when George W. Bush said that. I think that's a wonderful quote, piece of sound, and I say that wonderful not for George W. Bush, but just what he says in that we've used now in a podcast I think we did tied to opening day of baseball a couple of years ago, of politicians saying how much they like baseball, and that was just the kicker. And as Shannon mentioned, we have a podcast coming up, or has been played already, of George W. Bush as part owner of the Texas Rangers. Now the Rangers won the World Series, and his history of talking to C-SPAN or on C-SPAN about the Texas Rangers and about the infamous trade of Sammy Sosa from the Rangers comes up. And so we run that again. So that kind of sound that clip is a great one for us to plug in a couple different ways.
As we work towards wrapping up this episode, I want to play a clip from 2011 from Tucker Carlson and on his thoughts on Donald Trump running.
There's so much volatility just beneath the surface in American life, not just in the Republican Party, that, again, if there was ever a year where something truly weird happened, where Obama stepped down and Joy Behar ran as the Democrat and, I don't know, Donald Trump became the Republican nominee, unlikely, but if there was ever a year, this is it.
How are we going to cover 2024 with the weekly podcast?
Oh, wonderful. So a couple things. Just one reason I did that Tucker thing, I love you playing that, is a couple people that we've had on C-SPAN many times are just so interesting to go back and listen to and watch again. Christopher Hitchens, for example, endlessly watchable and listen to. Tucker Carlson was on C-SPAN starting in 1995 taking calls, and there's a deep history of that. So when he came on in 2011 and talked about Trump becoming president, it was like, wow, what a eureka moment, lightning bolt that we have that, and against the backdrop of what's happening in politics now. As far as 2024, I have already in mind, Shannon, what I'm going to do for the Iowa caucus and New Hampshire primary. We're starting to work on that, how to tie it in. One thing that's very important is that we've said this from the beginning, that I want to shy away from what's happening right now, because it's not as fun to do the historical stuff if you get wrapped up into the TikTok of current events, meaning that we have great stuff from Iowa and New Hampshire of years ago, and that deserves to be shown again, but deserves to be unearthed. If all we do is focus on what's happening now, that's tough to pull off if we maintain a non-biased approach to this. But if we do historical-based moments from Iowa and New Hampshire, I think that's fair game. It's a lot of fun. So, look out for some fun clips from our coverage of those two in years past. And toward the conventions. I mean, my God, the Democrats are going to be in Chicago, and Chicago is so rich in political convention history. So, there are ways to attach and connect what's happening in politics right now with some of the neat things that people may not be aware of that we have.
At the end of every podcast, you do a very fun plug for the video library. So can you just explain why the video library is so important, and any tips or tricks on how to search it? Because you've mentioned the number of hours, and that seems daunting, but it really is a great resource for anyone interested.
Yeah, so here's the deal. When you go on YouTube and you search YouTube and you say, my God, look at this video I found, Eureka, you're discovering someone else's video that someone else has posted and made. So you're discovering someone else's video. When you go into our archives and you find a clip or a video that's never been seen before, that's an even greater thrill. YouTube is wonderful. I love YouTube, on there all the time. But in our video archives, it's the raw material. So if you get jazzed up by watching things as it happens, and not having it narrated for you, but just saying, my God, look at what this politician said 20 years ago, and versus what he or she says now, have the politics switch. So it's neat to do that. The resource is for everybody, but since Shannon mentioned I'm a communications director, we're always encouraging reporters to go in and use us to search the old video. Definitely academicians, students. If you're a journalism student, it's a great way to learn how to cover a press conference. It's from beginning to end. I love telling journalism students, go back and watch this White House briefing and write a story of it. What would you take away from it? It is, as always, I want to plug the architect of the video library, Dr. Robert Browning at Purdue University, who came up with it and who started recording C-SPAN and putting it and digitizing it, putting it online. And, again, for me, going back, because I'm of that era of seeing everything I remember seeing on TV for the first time in the 80s and 90s, 2000s, it's such a kick, reliving it. And, it's everything that's serious to what everybody's ties looked like back in the 90s. So you can have fun with it and you can be totally serious about it.
And the cost is?
Totally free.
Totally free.
Just mention podcast 2024 in your promo code and we'll get you set up for free. Yeah.
Well, Howard, I just want to thank you for taking the time today to sit here in the studio with me that we do quite often, usually on Tuesdays. And today when we're recording is a Tuesday. So it's just like any other Tuesday for us here.
This is classic C-SPAN, where we are afraid to say our names and say nice things about ourselves. I want the public listening to this to know that Shannon Rice is an amazing talent and runs 15 podcasts by herself here in the Glass Enclosed Nerve Center of C-SPAN Radio in the heart of C-SPAN's historic podcast district. And Rachel Katz has been just a wonderful, fabulous colleague and friend for these decades and decades we've been working together. So
slow down on the multiple decades.
Nice. I went to Maryland. Math wasn't my strong suit.
Well, let's wrap this up. Thanks to everyone for listening. And Howard, I'm going to throw it over to you to remind people to listen and check out the video library.
Thanks for listening and happy searching. And don't forget to find C-SPAN's The Weekly wherever you get podcasts. The Weekly!